My name is Sarah, and I'm 28 years old. At my brother's wedding reception, I found myself seated at the kids' table, right next to the trash cans, while my sister-in-law smiled and said, "That place suits you." I just sent one message and left in silence. When they remembered me again, she was already crying in despair. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible at your own family's celebration. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up being treated like garbage at what should have been a joyful family celebration. Growing up, my brother David was always the golden child. 3 years older than me, he could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. When he brought home mediocre grades, they celebrated his effort. When I brought home straight A's, it was just expected. When he quit his third job in 2 years, they supported his journey of self-discovery. When I worked 2 jobs to pay for college, they barely noticed. So when David announced his engagement to Jennifer, a woman who made snide comments about my career choice as a librarian and my simple lifestyle, I wasn't surprised when she immediately began planning me out of their wedding narrative. During the engagement party, she introduced me to people as David's little sister who still reads books for a living. The way she said it made it sound like I collected trash. The wedding planning became a 6-month exercise in subtle exclusion. I wasn't consulted about colors, venues, or dates. When I offered to help with decorations, Jennifer smiled sweetly and said they had everything under control. When I suggested a family photo location we'd used for years, she dismissed it as not sophisticated enough. Every suggestion I made was politely rejected. Every offer to help was graciously declined. The morning of the wedding, I arrived at the venue early, dressed in my best navy dress and the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me. I watched as Jennifer directed the setup with military precision, positioning flowers and adjusting centerpieces. She glanced at me once, her eyes scanning from my shoes to my hair, and I saw that familiar look of judgment cross her face. The ceremony was beautiful, I'll admit. David looked happy, genuinely happy, and despite everything, I was glad for him. I sat in the 3rd row behind cousins I barely knew, while Jennifer's college friends filled the front rows on the bride's side. During the recessional, I caught David's eye and smiled. He nodded back, but his attention was immediately pulled away by Jennifer's squeeze of his arm. At the reception, I followed the crowd toward the elegantly decorated ballroom. Round tables with crisp white linens and towering floral centerpieces filled the space. Each table had a number and place cards with guests' names in elegant calligraphy. I found table 8 and began searching for my name among the place cards. That's when I realized the magnitude of Jennifer's final insult. Table 8 was positioned in the far corner of the room, next to the service station where servers dumped used dishes. The kids' table wasn't even for actual children. It was where they'd seated me alongside David's teenage nephews, and one bewildered elderly uncle who apparently needed supervision. My place card sat between 8-year-old Tommy and the oversized trash receptacle that servers used throughout the evening. Jennifer appeared beside me like a satisfied cat. "I hope you don't mind the seating arrangement," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "We thought you'd be more comfortable here." "That place suits you." Her friends giggled behind her, and I realized this had been planned, discussed, and executed with malicious intent. For a moment, I stood there processing the deliberate cruelty. This wasn't just poor planning or an oversight. This was calculated humiliation in front of our extended family and all their friends. Jennifer wanted me to make a scene, to protest, to give her ammunition for later stories about David's difficult sister, who couldn't handle not being the center of attention. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened the family group chat, and typed one simple message: "Congratulations on your perfect wedding. I hope you both get exactly what you deserve." Then I placed my cloth napkin on the kids' table, picked up my purse, and walked out of that reception with my head held high. What Jennifer didn't know was that my simple job as a librarian had taught me research skills, and what I'd discovered about her during those 6 months of wedding planning was about to change everything. But that revelation would have to wait until tomorrow, when David would call me 17 times before I finally answered. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing incessantly. David's name flashed across the screen for the 17th time before I finally decided to answer. His voice was strained, almost panicked. "Sarah, what the hell was that last night? Jennifer's been crying all morning. She says you embarrassed her in front of everyone." I set my coffee down carefully, choosing my words with the precision of someone who'd spent months being diplomatically dismissed. "I sent you both my congratulations and left quietly." How exactly did that embarrass her? You know what you did. That cryptic message, walking out during dinner. Mom's furious, Dad's disappointed, and Jennifer's family thinks our family is full of drama queens. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been seated next to garbage cans and somehow I was the one causing embarrassment. David, where exactly was I supposed to sit during dinner? Since you're so concerned about family behavior. Silence stretched between us. What do you mean? I mean, did you know your wife seated me at the kids' table next to the trash cans? Did you know she told me that place suited me? My voice remained calm, but I could feel anger building beneath the surface. Sarah, come on. The seating was complicated. We had limited space and stop. I interrupted him, something I'd rarely done in our entire relationship. Just stop making excuses for her. You know exactly what happened and you know it was deliberate. David's tone shifted, becoming defensive. Jennifer worked really hard on that wedding. She's been stressed for months trying to make everything perfect. Maybe she made a mistake with the seating, but you didn't have to humiliate her by storming out. That word again, humiliate. Apparently, it was only possible for me to humiliate others, never the reverse. I didn't storm out, David. I left quietly after being treated like an unwanted guest at my own brother's wedding. But here's what I'm curious about. Did Jennifer tell you about her conversation with Marcus Peterson? Another silence. Longer this time. What conversation? The one where she bragged about putting me in my place at your wedding. The one where she said I needed to learn that not everything was about me. Marcus's wife Jessica posted about it on social media last night. It's quite entertaining reading. I could hear David breathing heavily through the phone. Sarah, whatever Jessica posted, you know how social media gets blown out of proportion. Or, I continued smoothly, maybe we should discuss her conversation with your college friend Mike, where she explained how she'd been managing your sister's situation for months. Mike texted me this morning. Apparently, Jennifer's been telling people I was jealous of her relationship with you and that she'd been protecting you from my inappropriate attachment. The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. When David finally spoke, his voice was smaller, less certain. She wouldn't say those things. She did say those things. To multiple people. At your wedding reception, while I was sitting next to trash cans. I took a sip of my coffee, letting that sink in. But David, that's not even the interesting part. What do you mean? I mean, the real question isn't why Jennifer treated me badly. The real question is what else she's been hiding from you. Because someone who lies about one thing usually lies about others. I could practically hear him processing this through the phone. David had always been trusting to a fault, seeing the best in people even when evidence suggested otherwise. It was one of his most endearing qualities and his biggest weakness. Sarah, what are you talking about? I'm talking about doing what librarians do best: research. Did you know Jennifer never actually graduated from Boston University like she told you? Did you know her previous engagement ended when her fiancé discovered she'd been stealing money from their joint account? Did you know she's currently 3 months behind on her student loan payments, despite telling you she paid them off last year? The phone went completely quiet. I imagined David sitting in his honeymoon suite, still in his pajamas, trying to process information that contradicted everything he thought he knew about his new wife. You're lying. His voice was barely a whisper. I'm not lying. I have documentation. Bank records that became public when she filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago. Employment records showing she was fired from her last job for embezzlement, though charges weren't pressed. And David? Her real name isn't Jennifer Marie Hartwell. It's Jenny Martinez, and she has a 5-year-old daughter living with her mother in New Mexico. The phone clattered, and I heard David's voice distant, muffled, like he'd dropped it. I waited, sipping my coffee, listening to the sounds of what I assumed was his world imploding. When he picked up the phone again, his voice was raw. How long have you known? 6 months. Since the day after she told me I wasn't sophisticated enough to help with wedding planning. I kept my tone neutral, factual. I started researching the day she made it clear she wanted me eliminated from your life. Amazing what public records can tell you about someone when you know where to look. Why didn't you tell me sooner? It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself repeatedly. Because you wouldn't have believed me. You would have thought I was jealous or vindictive or trying to sabotage your happiness. You would have chosen her over truth, and I would have lost my brother forever. And now? Now you're married to a woman who humiliated your sister at your wedding reception and lied about her entire identity. Now the choice is yours, but at least you're making it with complete information. David was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. What am I supposed to do with this? That's up to you, David. But whatever you decide, remember that I didn't create this situation. I just refused to be treated like garbage while pretending everything was fine. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. And David, when Jennifer asks you about this conversation, and she will, remember that everything I told you is verifiable. Every single detail. I hung up the phone and sat in my quiet apartment, surrounded by my books and my simple life that Jennifer had mocked so thoroughly. Outside, it was starting to rain, and I realized that for the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. 3 hours after I hung up on David, my phone started ringing again. This time, it wasn't my brother, it was my mother, and her voice had that particular edge that meant she was about to deliver a lecture wrapped in disappointment. "Sarah Michelle, what on earth has gotten into you? David called us in tears saying you've been spreading lies about Jennifer, on their wedding day no less." I leaned back in my reading chair, the same one where I'd spent countless hours as a child escaping into other people's stories. Now I was living my own story, and apparently, it was the kind that made people uncomfortable. "Hello, Mom. I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. Yes, the wedding was lovely, except for the part where I was seated with 8-year-olds next to the garbage disposal area." "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. Jennifer worked very hard to accommodate everyone. These things happen at large events." The word accommodate almost made me laugh. Is that what we were calling it now? "Mom, did David tell you what I actually said to him?" "He said you made up stories about Jennifer's background, trying to ruin their marriage before it even started." "Honestly, Sarah, I'm ashamed of you. This jealous behavior needs to stop." Jealous. Another favorite word in my family's vocabulary when it came to my reactions to being treated poorly. Anytime I objected to something, I was being jealous, dramatic, or difficult. I'm going to tell you the same thing I told David. Everything I shared with him is documentable fact. Jennifer lied about her education, her employment history, her financial situation, and her personal history. She has a child she never mentioned and a criminal record for financial fraud. "Sarah, let me finish, Mom. I spent 6 months watching this woman insult me, exclude me, and treat me like an inconvenience in my own family. Yesterday, she seated me at a table with children next to trash cans and told me it suited me, in front of our relatives and her friends." My mother's voice softened slightly, but she maintained her position. "Maybe the seating wasn't ideal, but that doesn't justify trying to destroy David's marriage with lies and gossip. They're not lies. Would you like me to email you the documentation?" The silence stretched long enough that I could hear my father's voice in the background asking what was wrong. "You actually researched your brother's wife?" My mother's voice carried a mixture of horror and fascination. "I researched a woman who was systematically excluding me from my brother's life while lying about who she was. Yes, I did. And I'd do it again." "Sarah, this is not normal behavior. Normal people don't investigate their future sister-in-laws like private detectives. Normal sister-in-laws don't humiliate family members at wedding receptions while hiding their criminal records either. But here we are." I heard my father take the phone. His voice was tired, the tone of a man who'd refereed too many family conflicts over the years. "Sarah, sweetheart, what's the end game here? Even if everything you're saying is true, David's already married to her. What do you want to accomplish?" It was a good question, and one I'd been asking myself since the moment I walked out of that reception. I want David to know who he married. I want our family to stop pretending that treating me badly is acceptable as long as it's done politely. And I want Jennifer to understand that actions have consequences. What kind of consequences? I looked out my window at the rain that had intensified throughout the morning, the kind that come naturally when someone's lies catch up with them. I didn't create Jennifer's past, Dad. I just chose not to pretend it doesn't exist. Are you going to tell other people about this? I don't need to tell anyone anything. Jennifer's been bragging about how she handled me at the wedding. Social media is already doing the work for me. My father sighed deeply. "Sarah, I love you, but this path you're going down, revenge, investigation, public embarrassment, this isn't who you are." "You're right, Dad. Who I am is someone who spent 28 years being accommodating, understanding, and quietly accepting poor treatment for the sake of family harmony. But yesterday, sitting at that kid's table while Jennifer's friends laughed at me, I realized that version of Sarah wasn't working out very well. So what now?" My mother had taken the phone back. "Now I wait. David has information he didn't have before. He can choose what to do with it, but I'm done pretending that keeping peace is more important than keeping dignity." After I hung up, I made myself lunch and settled in with a book. Around 2 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Amy, who'd been at the wedding. "Jessica Peterson posted about Jennifer's comments last night. People are talking, this is getting messy fast." I texted back, "I'm not creating the mess. I'm just refusing to clean it up." An hour later, another text, this time from my college friend Mark. "Saw the wedding drama on social media. Are you okay?" That seating situation looked brutal in the photos. I hadn't considered that people would photograph the seating arrangements, but of course they had. In the age of social media, everything was documented. I spent the rest of the afternoon in peaceful solitude, reading and occasionally glancing at my phone as notifications trickled in. People I hadn't heard from in years were reaching out, some offering support, others clearly fishing for gossip. By evening, the rain had stopped, and I decided to take a walk around my neighborhood. The air smelled clean and fresh, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe easily. No wedding stress, no family drama to manage, no Jennifer to navigate around. When I returned home, there was a voicemail from David. His voice sounded hollow, exhausted. "Sarah, we need to talk. Not about what you told me. I mean, we do need to talk about that too. But first, I need to apologize. I saw the photos from the reception. I saw where Jennifer seated you, and I saw her laughing about it with her friends. I should have noticed. I should have protected you. I'm sorry." I saved the voicemail but didn't call him back. David was starting to see the situation clearly, but he needed time to process everything without me pushing or manipulating the outcome. Have you ever experienced that moment when you realize someone you trusted has been systematically undermining you while you bent over backwards to keep peace? Leave a comment below about how you handled it. Tomorrow would bring new developments, but tonight I was content to sit in my quiet apartment, surrounded by books and truth, knowing that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop participating in your own mistreatment. Monday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was preparing for work when my doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m. Through the peephole, I saw Jennifer standing on my front step, still in what looked like pajamas and a hastily thrown-on coat. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, and her eyes were red-rimmed. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "Jennifer, this is a surprise. We need to talk." Her voice was hoarse, probably from crying or yelling, possibly both. "Do we? Because yesterday at your wedding reception, you made it pretty clear that talking to me wasn't a priority." She pushed past me into my apartment without invitation, turning to face me with an expression I'd never seen before, raw desperation mixed with anger. "You vindictive little witch. How dare you try to ruin my marriage with your lies?" I closed the door calmly and leaned against it. Having Jennifer in my space, seeing her fall apart, was actually quite satisfying. Which lies would those be? "You know exactly what you did. David spent our entire wedding night questioning me about things that happened years ago. Things that have nothing to do with our marriage. Like the child you never mentioned, or the criminal record, or maybe the fake college degree." I walked to my kitchen and poured myself coffee, deliberately not offering her any. "Those things?" Jennifer's facade of control cracked completely. "My daughter is none of his business. What happened with my ex-fiance was a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion. And I did go to Boston University, I just didn't finish. You told David you graduated summa cum laude. I would have graduated summa cum laude if I'd finished." The twisted logic was almost impressive. "And the embezzlement charges? Those were dropped." She was grasping now, trying to find solid ground in a conversation that had none. "Because your victim chose not to press charges, not because you didn't steal the money." Jennifer stood in my living room, surrounded by my books and my simple life she'd mocked so thoroughly, looking smaller and more desperate than I'd ever seen her. It occurred to me that this was the first time we'd ever had an honest conversation. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "What will it take for you to leave us alone?" "I want nothing from you, Jennifer." I shared information with my brother about the woman he married. "What he does with that information is between you and him. But you're not done, are you? You're going to keep digging, keep trying to destroy what David and I have built together." I set down my coffee cup and really looked at her. "What exactly do you think you and David have built together? A relationship based on lies? A marriage that started with you humiliating his family? I worked so hard to make that wedding perfect. You have no idea the stress I was under, trying to coordinate everything, make everyone happy. Everyone, except me. You made it clear from the beginning that you didn't approve of me. You were cold, judgmental, always watching me like you were waiting for me to mess up. The accusation was so backwards it took my breath away. I was watching you because you were systematically excluding me from my brother's life while lying about who you were. My instincts were correct." Jennifer began crying again, but there was something calculated about it. Like tears were just another tool in her manipulation arsenal. "David loves me. We're building a life together. Can't you just let us be happy? If your happiness requires lying and humiliating people, then no, I can't support that." I checked my watch. "I need to get ready for work. The conversation is over." "This isn't over, Sarah. I won't let you destroy my marriage." Something in her tone made me pause. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. I've worked too hard to get where I am to let David's jealous sister ruin everything." There it was again. Jealous. The magic word that was supposed to discredit any legitimate concerns I might have. "Jennifer, let me be very clear about something. I don't want your husband. I don't want your life. I don't want anything you have. What I wanted was basic respect at my brother's wedding, and what I got instead was calculated humiliation. You created this situation, not me." She wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders, some of her usual composure returning. David chose me. He married me. Nothing you dig up is going to change that. You're probably right. David's always been loyal to a fault. But here's what's interesting about truth. Jennifer, it has a way of surfacing eventually. I didn't create your past. I just chose not to ignore it. After she left, I called in sick to work. Not because I was actually ill, but because I needed time to process what had just happened. Jennifer, showing up at my apartment in desperation, told me that whatever conversation she'd had with David after my phone call had been more serious than I'd anticipated. Around noon, my phone rang. It was David. "Sarah, Jennifer told me she went to your apartment this morning. I'm sorry. She shouldn't have done that." No, she shouldn't have. But she did, and it was quite illuminating. "She's scared, Sarah. She thinks you're going to keep digging into her past, trying to find more things to hurt her with. And what do you think, David?" A long pause. "I think I married someone I don't actually know. And I think my sister spent 6 months being treated badly by that person while I was too distracted to notice." It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I'd received from anyone in my family, and it meant more than I expected. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. We're supposed to leave for our honeymoon tomorrow, but everything feels different now. She keeps insisting that her past doesn't matter. But Sarah, she has a 5-year-old daughter, a daughter she's never mentioned. How do you hide something like that? The same way you hide everything else. One lie at a time until the truth becomes unrecognizable. I keep thinking about you sitting at that kid's table and how she smiled when she told you it suited you. I keep wondering what kind of person does that to someone they're supposed to consider family. Someone who never considered me family in the first place." David was quiet for a long time. "I should have protected you from all of this. I'm sorry. Thank you. That means a lot. What happens now?" "Now you figure out who you married and what you want to do about it. And Jennifer figures out that treating people badly has consequences she can't charm her way out of." After we hung up, I realized that somewhere in the midst of all this drama, something had shifted. I was no longer the accommodating sister who quietly accepted poor treatment. I was no longer willing to prioritize other people's comfort over my own dignity. Whatever happened next with David and Jennifer's marriage, I knew one thing for certain. I would never again sit quietly at a kid's table while someone told me it suited me. By Tuesday evening, the story had spread through our extended family like wildfire. My phone had been buzzing all day with calls and texts from relatives who'd heard various versions of what happened at the wedding. The most interesting call came from my Aunt Linda, my father's sister, who'd always been the family gossip but also surprisingly insightful. "Sarah, honey, I need to tell you something about your brother's wedding reception that you might not know." I settled into my chair with a cup of tea, preparing for whatever revelation was coming. "After you left on Saturday, Jennifer got very drunk. I mean sloppy drunk. She started telling people at our table about how she'd handled you, bragging about putting you in your place. I heard about that from several people. But here's what you haven't heard. Your cousin Mike's wife started recording her on her phone because Jennifer was being so obnoxious. She got about 10 minutes of Jennifer explaining to a table full of people how she'd been planning your humiliation for months." My teacup paused halfway to my lips. "She was planning it for months?" "Oh, honey." Jennifer went into detail about how she'd researched which table would be most insulting, how she'd positioned it next to the service station on purpose, how she'd even requested that the kids' table be set up with smaller chairs to make you look ridiculous. The calculated cruelty was breathtaking, even for someone who'd already shown herself to be manipulative and dishonest. She also talked about how she'd been working to isolate you from David for the entire engagement. She said she told David that you were jealous of their relationship and that you'd been making inappropriate comments about not wanting to share him. She said I made inappropriate comments about not wanting to share my brother? That's exactly what she said? And Sarah? She laughed about it. She told a table full of people that you had some kind of unhealthy attachment to David and that she was protecting him from your jealousy. I set down my teacup, processing the implications of what my aunt was telling me. Jennifer hadn't just humiliated me at the wedding, she'd been systematically poisoning my relationship with my brother for months. "Aunt Linda, does David know about this recording?" "I don't think so. Mike's wife sent it to me because she was disgusted by Jennifer's behavior, but she wasn't sure what to do with it." "What's on the recording exactly?" Jennifer explaining in detail how she manipulated the seating chart specifically to humiliate you, bragging about how she'd convinced David that you were inappropriately possessive, and making comments about how your job and lifestyle proved you were mentally unstable and potentially dangerous to their relationship. The phrase mentally unstable hit me like a physical blow. Jennifer hadn't just been excluding me, she'd been building a narrative that painted me as psychologically disturbed. She said I was mentally unstable. She said, and I quote, "David's sister has obvious psychological issues. She can't handle seeing him with another woman, and I'm protecting him from her instability. Tonight proved that I was right to keep her away from us. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't just about wedding seating or family dynamics. Jennifer had been constructing a story that could potentially affect my career, my relationships, my entire reputation. Aunt Linda, I need you to get me a copy of that recording. I already asked Mike's wife to send it to me. Sarah, I have to ask, what are you planning to do with this information? It was a fair question. What was I planning to do? Jennifer had escalated far beyond simple rudeness or family tension. She'd been deliberately sabotaging my relationship with my brother while building a case against my mental health. I'm going to make sure David knows exactly who he married and what she's been saying about his sister. Be careful. Honey, Jennifer strikes me as the type who doesn't go down without a fight. After my aunt hung up, I sat in my apartment thinking about the conversation. Jennifer's behavior had crossed every line I could imagine, but there was something else bothering me. If she'd been planning this humiliation for months, if she'd been poisoning David against me systematically, what else had she been planning? My phone buzzed with a text from David. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? I need to ask you about some things Jennifer told me. I texted back. What kind of things? Things about your behavior during the engagement. Things that don't sound like you, but I need to understand what's been happening. So it was starting. Jennifer was going to try to discredit me preemptively, probably painting me as an unreliable source whose information about her past couldn't be trusted because of my mental instability. I called David instead of texting back. He answered on the first ring. David, what exactly did Jennifer tell you about my behavior during your engagement? Sarah, I don't want to get into this over the phone. What did she tell you? He sighed heavily. She said you've been inappropriate about our relationship, that you made comments about not wanting to share me, that you seemed jealous of our relationship in ways that concerned her. And you believed her? I didn't know what to believe. Some of the things she described sounded extreme, but she seemed genuinely worried about you. David, in our entire lives, have I ever given you any reason to think I had inappropriate feelings towards you? Or that I couldn't handle you being in relationships? A long pause. No, but Jennifer seemed so concerned, and she said you'd been subtle about it, that she'd noticed things I might have missed because I'm too close to the situation. The manipulation was masterful, I had to admit. Jennifer had positioned herself as the concerned party protecting David from a sister he was too naive to recognize as problematic. David, tomorrow I'm going to show you something that will explain everything Jennifer has been doing for the past 6 months. But first, I need you to think carefully about something. What? In all the time Jennifer was concerned about my behavior, did she ever suggest you talk to me directly about her concerns? Did she ever recommend that you and I have a conversation about whatever issues she was noticing? Another pause. Longer this time. No. She said it would be better not to confront you directly because it might make your behavior worse. Of course she did. Because the last thing Jennifer wanted was for you and me to have an honest conversation about what was actually happening. Sarah, what are you saying? I'm saying that tomorrow, when we meet for coffee, you're going to learn exactly how extensively your wife has been lying to you. About me, about herself, about everything. When I hung up, I realized that Jennifer had made a crucial error. In her eagerness to discredit me, she'd created evidence of her own deception and cruelty. And now I had documentation not just of who she really was, but of exactly how she'd manipulated my brother against his own sister. Tomorrow's coffee meeting was going to be very enlightening indeed. Wednesday morning, I arrived at our usual coffee shop 15 minutes early, clutching a folder that contained printed emails, public records, screenshots, and the video file my aunt had sent me the night before. David walked in looking like he hadn't slept, his hair disheveled and his usual confident demeanor replaced by something I'd rarely seen in my brother, uncertainty. He ordered his coffee and sat down across from me, avoiding eye contact. Sarah, before we start, I need to say something. Whatever's been happening between you and Jennifer, whatever the truth is about her past, I want you to know that she's my wife now. We have to find a way to make this work. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. David, I understand loyalty, but loyalty based on lies isn't actually loyalty, it's just enabling deception. What's that? He nodded toward the papers. This is Jennifer's real employment history. Not the version she told you where she worked in marketing for a prestigious firm in Boston. This shows she was actually fired from 3 different jobs for stealing from petty cash, falsifying expense reports, and in one case, identity theft of a coworker. David took the papers reluctantly, scanning them with increasing distress. Where did you get these? Public records, David. Employment litigation leaves a paper trail. Your wife has been sued by 2 former employers and has had criminal charges filed against her in 3 different states. I pulled out the next set of documents. This is her real educational background. She attended Boston University for 1 semester before dropping out due to academic probation. She never completed a degree anywhere, but she has a diploma in our apartment. Fake. You can order them online for about $50. David's hands were shaking as he looked through the papers. The child you mentioned? I pulled out a birth certificate and custody documents. Isabella Martinez, age 5, born in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Father unknown. Currently living with Jennifer's mother because Jennifer owes over $30,000 in back child support. Child support? But that would mean... It means your wife abandoned her 5-year-old daughter and hasn't paid a dime to support her in over 2 years. I watched my brother's face crumble as the reality of who he'd married began to sink in. David stared at the birth certificate like it might change if he looked at it long enough. A 5-year-old daughter. She has a 5-year-old daughter and never told me. David, that's not even the worst part. I pulled out my phone and opened the video file my aunt had sent me. This was recorded at your wedding reception after I left. Jennifer explaining to a table full of our relatives exactly how she planned my humiliation. I pressed play and watched David's expression change from confusion to horror as Jennifer's voice filled the space between us. On the recording, she was clearly intoxicated, her words slurred but her meaning crystal clear. I spent months planning how to handle David's weird sister. She's obviously got some kind of unhealthy attachment to him, you know? Like, who gets that involved in their brother's relationship unless there's something wrong with them psychologically? David's face went pale as Jennifer's recorded voice continued. So tonight, I put her exactly where she belongs with the children and the garbage. I researched the most humiliating table placement possible. I even had them use smaller chairs at that table so she'd look ridiculous sitting there. The recording captured the laughter from other guests, people we both knew, finding entertainment in my deliberate humiliation. David's too nice to see how manipulative she is, but I've been protecting him from her instability for months. I told him she was making inappropriate comments about not wanting to share him with other women. Tonight proved I was right to keep her away from our relationship. I paused the recording and watched David process what he'd just heard. His hands were clenched into fists on the table, and his breathing had become shallow and angry. She lied about you. She lied about everything. His voice was barely a whisper. The woman you married doesn't exist, David. Jennifer Marie Hartwell is a complete fabrication. The real person is Jenny Martinez, a woman with a criminal record, an abandoned child, massive debt, and apparently a talent for psychological manipulation. David put his head in his hands. What am I supposed to do now? I married her. We have a lease together, joint bank accounts, a whole life planned. You figure out if you can build a real relationship with someone who's lied about everything, including her reasons for keeping you away from your own sister. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I should have seen this. I should have protected you. You couldn't see it because she's very good at what she does. But David, you need to understand something. This isn't over. Jennifer isn't going to just accept that her lies have been exposed. She's going to escalate. What do you mean? I pulled out the last document in my folder, a restraining order application I'd filled out, but not yet filed. Yesterday morning, when she came to my apartment, Jennifer threatened me. She said she wouldn't let me destroy her marriage, and that she'd worked too hard to get where she is to let David's jealous sister ruin everything. David looked at the paperwork with fresh alarm. You think she's dangerous? I think she's desperate, and desperate people do unpredictable things. A woman who abandons her child and steals from employers isn't someone who's going to give up her current life without a fight. We sat in silence for several minutes while David processed everything. Finally, he looked up at me with an expression I recognized from our childhood, the look he got when he'd made a decision, and nothing would change his mind. I can't stay married to her, Sarah. Not after this. Not after what she did to you, what she's been saying about you, what she's hidden from me. Are you sure? Because divorce is complicated, and she's going to make it as difficult as possible. I'm sure. But first, I need to make something right. He pulled out his phone and started typing. I'm posting something on social media. An apology to you and an explanation of what really happened at the wedding. David, you don't have to do that. Yes, I do. Jennifer humiliated you publicly, and she's been spreading lies about you to our family and friends. The truth needs to be just as public as her lies were. As I watched my brother type his post, I realized that something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in our relationship, David was choosing truth over comfort, difficult conversations over easy denial. Jennifer's elaborate deception had backfired spectacularly, but as I looked at the restraining order application in my folder, I knew this victory came with a price. Jennifer wasn't the type of person who would accept defeat gracefully, and I had a feeling the real battle was just beginning. What I didn't know was that Jennifer was already planning her counterattack, and it would be more vicious than anything I could have imagined. Sometimes when you expose someone's lies, they don't retreat, they double down. And Jennifer Martinez was about to show me exactly what doubling down looked like. Thursday afternoon brought the storm I'd been expecting. I was at work, helping a patron find resources on genealogy research when my supervisor, Mrs. Henderson, approached my desk with an uncomfortable expression. "Sarah, I need to speak with you privately. There's been a complaint filed against you." My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. "What kind of complaint?" "Someone called the library board this morning claiming you've been using library resources to stalk and harass a member of the public. They've requested an investigation into your professional conduct." I didn't need to ask who had made the complaint. Jennifer's counterattack had begun, and she'd chosen to target my livelihood, the one thing I valued most besides my family relationships. "Mrs. Henderson, I can explain everything. May I see the complaint?" She handed me a typed letter on official-looking letterhead from Martinez Legal Services. Apparently, Jennifer had even created a fake law firm to lend credibility to her accusations. The complaint alleged that I had systematically used library computer systems and research databases to conduct unauthorized investigations into private citizens, constituting harassment and potential stalking behavior. It requested an immediate investigation and suggested I posed a danger to library patrons due to documented psychological instability. "Sarah, this is very serious. The board wants to meet with you tomorrow morning. Until then, you're suspended pending investigation." I read through the complaint again, noting how cleverly Jennifer had twisted my legitimate research into something sinister. She'd even included screenshots of what appeared to be search histories showing extensive background checks, though I suspected these were fabricated. "Mrs. Henderson, I need you to know that this complaint is completely false. It's being filed by someone who's retaliating against me for exposing her criminal background to my family." "Sarah, you're saying you did conduct background checks?" "On my brother's wife, yes. But I used public records and my own personal research skills, not library resources, and I had legitimate concerns about her past that proved to be accurate." Mrs. Henderson looked troubled. "Even so, the board has to take these allegations seriously. Please gather any documentation that might support your side of this story for tomorrow's meeting." I spent the rest of the afternoon creating a comprehensive file of everything that had happened. Jennifer's fake identity documents, David's social media post defending me, the recording of her wedding reception comments, and most importantly, evidence that Martinez Legal Services didn't actually exist. That evening, David called me, sounding frantic. "Sarah, Jennifer's gone. She cleaned out our joint bank account and disappeared. But that's not the worst part. She left something for you." "What do you mean she left something for me?" "A letter. And Sarah, it's not good." 20 minutes later, David arrived at my apartment holding an envelope with my name written in Jennifer's careful handwriting. Inside was a single page that made my blood run cold. "Dear Sarah," it began, "you thought you were so clever exposing my past, but you have no idea what I'm capable of when someone threatens everything I've worked for. By the time you read this, I'll be gone, but you'll be dealing with the consequences of your meddling for a very long time. I've filed complaints with your employer, contacted your landlord about suspicious behavior, and reached out to several of your friends and colleagues with concerning information about your mental stability. You wanted to play detective? Now you get to experience what it feels like when someone investigates you. Enjoy explaining to everyone why you're such an obsessed, vindictive person. Maybe next time you'll think twice before trying to destroy someone's life. Jennifer." David was watching my face as I read. "Sarah, what is she talking about? What complaints?" I told him about the library board investigation, watching his expression shift from concern to fury. "She's trying to destroy your career because you told me the truth about who she is." It gets worse. She mentions contacting my landlord and my friends. Jennifer's systematic about revenge. She won't stop with just one complaint. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone started ringing. The first call was from my landlord, Mr. Peterson, who'd received an anonymous tip that I was using my apartment to conduct illegal surveillance activities and storing sensitive documents belonging to other people. The second call was from my friend Michelle from college, confused about why someone had contacted her claiming to be concerned about my recent erratic behavior and asking if she'd noticed signs of psychological instability. By the end of the evening, I'd received 7 calls from people in my life who'd been contacted by Jennifer or her associates with various stories about my mental health, my professional conduct, or my supposedly dangerous obsession with other people's private lives. "David, she's not just running away. She's scorched earth. She's trying to destroy my reputation, my career, and my relationships before she disappears. We have to stop her." "How?" "She's probably already left the state. And look how effective her campaign is. Half the people who know me now think I'm having some kind of breakdown." David was quiet for a long time, staring at Jennifer's letter. "Sarah, there's something else. When I went through our apartment after she left, I found files. She's been keeping detailed records on you for months. Photos of your daily routine, notes about your work schedule, copies of your social media posts, even research into your friends and coworkers. The revelation hit me like ice water. She was stalking me. Not just stalking, planning. These files go back to 2 weeks after we got engaged. She's been preparing for this confrontation since the beginning. I thought about Jennifer's letter, her systematic approach to destroying my reputation, her careful documentation of my life. This wasn't the impulsive revenge of someone who'd been caught in lies. This was the calculated destruction of someone who'd been preparing for war from the moment she decided I was a threat. David, tomorrow I have to face a library board investigation that could cost me my job. Jennifer's contacted my landlord, my friends, probably my family members too. She's created a narrative that I'm mentally unstable and dangerous, and she's disappeared before anyone can question her story. So what do we do? I looked at Jennifer's letter again, this time noticing something I'd missed before. The letterhead on the fake legal complaint matched the return address on her personal note, both traced back to a mail forwarding service in Nevada. We prove that she's the one who's been conducting systematic harassment and stalking, and we make sure everyone she contacted knows exactly who they were really talking to. What do you think will happen next? Will Sarah be able to prove Jennifer's the real stalker, or will Jennifer's revenge campaign destroy everything Sarah has worked for? Drop your predictions in the comments below. But first, I had to survive tomorrow's meeting with the library board, and something told me Jennifer's revenge was just getting started. Friday morning, I walked into the library board meeting armed with a folder of evidence and a recording device app on my phone. The 5 board members sat around a conference table looking uncomfortable, clearly wishing they were anywhere else but dealing with personnel issues. Board Chairman Robert Hayes opened the meeting. Sarah, we've received serious allegations about your professional conduct. Before we proceed, do you understand the gravity of these charges? I understand that someone with a criminal record and a history of fraud has filed false complaints against me in retaliation for exposing her identity to my family. The board members exchanged glances. Clearly, they hadn't expected me to come out swinging. These are serious accusations, Sarah, said board member Patricia Yates. The complaint includes documentation of unauthorized research activities. I opened my folder and pulled out the first set of documents. Mrs. Yates, I've analyzed the so-called documentation. These screenshots of search histories have been digitally manipulated. Notice the timestamp inconsistencies and the fact that several of the alleged searches reference database subscriptions that our library doesn't actually have. I watched as they examined the evidence, their expressions shifting from certainty to confusion. Furthermore, I continued, the complaint was filed by Martinez Legal Services, which doesn't exist. The business registration number cited in their letterhead is fake, and the address traces to a mail forwarding service. Chairman Hayes looked up from the documents. Are you saying this entire complaint is fraudulent? I'm saying it's retaliation filed by someone who's been systematically stalking me for 6 months. I pulled out David's photographs of Jennifer's surveillance files. These are records my brother found in his apartment after his wife disappeared. She's been tracking my daily routine, photographing my activities, and building profiles on my friends and coworkers. Board member James Morton examined the photos with growing concern. This appears to be extensive surveillance activity. It gets worse. I played the recording of Jennifer's wedding reception comments, watching the board members' expressions change as they heard her detailed explanation of how she'd planned my humiliation and her assessment of my supposed mental instability. The woman who filed this complaint has been building a case against me since January, preparing for the moment when I might discover her criminal background and multiple false identities. I spent the next 20 minutes walking them through Jennifer's real history, her pattern of revenge against people who exposed her lies, and her systematic approach to destroying their reputations and livelihoods. Sarah, Patricia Yates said slowly, if what you're telling us is accurate, then you're the victim of an elaborate harassment campaign. I am. And Jennifer Martinez knew that targeting my career would be the most effective way to discredit me and prevent anyone from believing my information about her background. Chairman Hayes closed the folder of evidence. Sarah, based on what you've presented, we're dismissing the complaint against you. We'll also be filing a report with local law enforcement about the fraudulent nature of these allegations. Thank you. But there's one more thing you should know. Jennifer contacted other people in my life with similar false stories. She's trying to systematically destroy my reputation and relationships. What do you need from us? A letter verifying that the complaint was fraudulent and that my professional conduct has been exemplary. I'll need it to show to other people she's contacted. After the meeting, I felt cautiously optimistic. I'd won the first battle, but Jennifer's campaign was far from over. My phone had been buzzing all morning with calls from people she'd contacted, and I knew I'd spend the next week explaining the situation to everyone in my life. The first call I returned was to my landlord, Mr. Peterson, who'd been told I was conducting illegal surveillance activities from my apartment. Mr. Peterson, I need to explain what's really happening here. I gave him the condensed version of Jennifer's identity theft, her systematic stalking of me, and her revenge campaign. So the person who called me about suspicious activities was actually the one conducting surveillance. Exactly. And I have documentation proving everything I'm telling you. By noon, I'd called Michelle, my cousin Amy, 2 coworkers, and my dentist, all of whom had received calls from Jennifer or her associates, expressing concern about my mental health or professional conduct. The pattern was consistent. Jennifer presented herself as a concerned friend or family member who'd noticed troubling changes in my behavior. She suggested I might be having a breakdown, becoming obsessed with other people's personal lives, and possibly dangerous to be around. To people who didn't know me well, her story was believable. She came across as worried and reluctant to share concerns about someone she cared about. She had specific examples of my concerning behavior and official-sounding documentation to support her claims. But to people who actually knew me, her story fell apart quickly. Michelle laughed when I explained the situation. "Sarah, I thought it was weird when that woman called. She knew details about your life, but she got your personality completely wrong. She described someone paranoid and erratic, which is the opposite of how you've been your entire life." By the end of the day, I'd reached most of the people Jennifer had contacted. Some believed my version immediately. Others needed to see the evidence. A few seemed unsure what to believe and suggested I might need professional help to deal with this situation. That evening, David came over with updates on his own discoveries. I went through Jennifer's computer files more thoroughly. "Sarah, she's done this before." I found folders with research on at least 3 other people: her previous boyfriend, a former roommate, and a coworker from her last job. "What kind of research?" "The same kind she was doing on you. Detailed personal information, photos, social media monitoring, and what looks like systematic campaigns to damage their reputations when relationships ended badly." David showed me printed emails where Jennifer had reached out to employers, landlords, and personal contacts of her previous targets, always with the same story: concern about someone's mental health and potentially dangerous behavior. She has a system, Sarah. She builds detailed profiles on people close to her, gathers compromising information, and then deploys it strategically when she needs to eliminate threats or seek revenge. Did any of her previous victims fight back? One did. Her ex-boyfriend figured out what she was doing and tried to warn her next target. Jennifer filed a restraining order against him claiming harassment and stalking. She used his attempts to expose her as evidence of his obsession with her. The implications were chilling. Jennifer had turned defending yourself against her lies into evidence of the psychological instability she'd originally claimed to be concerned about. "David, she's not just smart, she's experienced. This isn't revenge, it's a systematic operation. What do we do now?" "We document everything and we prepare for escalation. Jennifer's pattern shows she doesn't stop until her target is completely discredited or too afraid to continue challenging her." As David left that evening, I realized that defeating Jennifer's revenge campaign wouldn't be enough. I needed to make sure she couldn't do this to anyone else. But first, I had to survive whatever she was planning next. And based on her previous patterns, the worst was yet to come. Saturday morning brought news that made my blood freeze. David called at 7 a.m., his voice shaking with anger and fear. "Sarah, Jennifer's escalated. She filed a police report claiming you've been stalking her and making threats. There's a warrant out for your arrest." I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. "What kind of threats?" "According to the report, you've been sending anonymous letters to her workplace, following her home and making verbal threats about harming her if she didn't leave town. She has photos, Sarah. Photos that supposedly show you near her apartment building." "David, I've never been to her apartment building. I don't even know where she works." "I know that, but the police don't. She's provided what looks like evidence of stalking behavior, and she's connected it to your documented history of mental instability from all those complaints she filed." This was Jennifer's masterstroke. She'd created a narrative where my exposure of her lies became evidence of my obsession. My research became stalking, and her revenge campaign became self-defense against a dangerous person. "David, where is she? I thought she'd left town." "She did, but she filed this report from Nevada claiming she had to flee because you were escalating your harassment. She's painted herself as a victim who was forced to abandon her new life because of your dangerous behavior." I got dressed quickly while staying on the phone with David. "What did the police say when you tried to explain the real situation?" "They said they'd investigate all claims thoroughly, but right now they have a formal complaint with evidence, and they have to follow protocol." "What kind of evidence could she possibly have?" "Photos of someone who looks like you outside her apartment building. Text message screenshots showing threatening messages from your phone number. Witness statements from people who supposedly overheard you making threats." The sophistication of Jennifer's frame job was terrifying. She'd created physical evidence, digital evidence, and human testimony to support her version of events. "David, none of that evidence is real. The photos must be manipulated, the texts are fake, and any witnesses are either lying or being deceived. I believe you, but proving that will take time. And meanwhile, there's a warrant for your arrest. I was getting dressed when I heard car doors slamming outside my apartment building. Looking out the window, I saw 2 police officers walking toward the main entrance. David, they're here. Sarah, do exactly what your lawyer tells you to do. Don't say anything without legal representation. I don't have a lawyer. You do now. I called Marcus Peterson. He's a criminal defense attorney who handles false accusation cases. He's meeting us at the police station. The next 2 hours were a blur of Miranda rights, booking procedures, and sitting in a holding cell while Marcus Peterson reviewed Jennifer's complaint and the supposed evidence against me. When he finally came to speak with me, his expression was grim but determined. Sarah, this is an extremely sophisticated false accusation case. Jennifer Martinez has created what appears to be a comprehensive package of evidence against you. But it's all fake. I believe it's fake, but it's very well done. The photos show someone with your hair color and build near her apartment. The text messages appear to come from your phone number, and she has 3 witness statements from people claiming to have seen you exhibiting threatening behavior. Marcus, I can prove where I was during the times these incidents supposedly occurred. I have work records, security footage, receipts. That's exactly what we're going to do. But Jennifer anticipated this defense. She's chosen incidents that occurred during times when you had gaps in your schedule or when you were in locations where you can't prove your exact whereabouts. Marcus pulled out his laptop and showed me the police report in detail. Jennifer had documented 6 separate incidents of alleged stalking and harassment over the past 2 weeks. Each incident was carefully timed to coincide with periods when I couldn't provide ironclad alibis. She's been planning this for weeks, Sarah. While you were focused on exposing her past, she was building a criminal case against you. Can we prove the evidence is fabricated? Eventually, yes. The photos can be analyzed for digital manipulation. The text messages can be traced to their actual origin, and we can investigate whether her witnesses actually exist or if they're part of her network. Her network? Sarah, based on what your brother told me about Jennifer's previous targets, she doesn't work alone. She has people who help her build these false narratives. Probably people she's helped with similar revenge campaigns. The realization that Jennifer was part of an organized group that specialized in destroying people's lives was overwhelming. How long will it take to prove my innocence? Weeks? Maybe months? And meanwhile, you'll be facing criminal charges, which means the story will become public record. Jennifer's strategy isn't just to get you arrested, it's to make the accusation itself proof of your guilt in the eyes of everyone who knows you. What do? We build our defense systematically. We prove where you were during each alleged incident. We analyze all her evidence for signs of fabrication, we investigate her witnesses, and we expose her pattern of false accusations against previous targets. Can I get bail? Yes, but there will be conditions. No contact with Jennifer, restrictions on your travel, possibly electronic monitoring. As Marcus left to arrange my bail hearing, I sat in the holding cell thinking about how completely Jennifer had outmaneuvered me. I'd won the battle by exposing her lies to David, but she'd won the war by turning my victory into evidence of my criminal behavior. When David arrived to post my bail, his expression was anguished. Sarah, I'm so sorry. This is my fault for not seeing who she was sooner. This isn't your fault, David. Jennifer's a professional. She's probably been planning this campaign since the day she decided I was a threat to her relationship with you. As we left the police station, I realized that my fight with Jennifer had evolved from personal revenge to something much larger. She wasn't just trying to punish me for exposing her. She was trying to completely destroy my life as a warning to anyone else who might challenge her in the future. But what Jennifer didn't know was that being arrested had given me something I didn't have before: access to the criminal justice system and investigators who could uncover the truth about her network of false accusers. The real battle was just beginning, and this time I wouldn't be fighting alone. The next 3 weeks were the most challenging of my life. While on bail with an ankle monitor, I couldn't work, couldn't travel more than 5 miles from my apartment, and had to check in with a probation officer twice a week. But Marcus Peterson was methodically building our defense, and what we discovered was more disturbing than I'd ever imagined. Sarah, we've identified Jennifer's network, Marcus announced during a meeting at his office. She's part of a group called Sister Support Network that supposedly helps women escape abusive relationships. But they're actually running organized revenge campaigns against targets. He pulled out a thick folder of documents. We've found at least 12 other victims over the past 3 years. Jennifer and her associates systematically destroy people's lives using false accusations, fabricated evidence, and coordinated character assassination. How do they get away with it? They're extremely careful. They research targets thoroughly, create plausible narratives, and use real emotions like concern for someone's mental health to make their lies believable. Most victims never figure out what's happening to them. Marcus showed me profiles of Jennifer's previous targets: a teacher who lost her job after being accused of inappropriate behavior with students, a nurse who was fired for allegedly stealing prescription drugs, a social worker who had her license suspended following accusations of falsifying reports. What do these people have in common? They all discovered something Jennifer wanted hidden. The teacher found out Jennifer was using fake credentials to work at an after-school program. The nurse caught Jennifer stealing from the pharmacy where they both worked. The social worker realized Jennifer was running identity theft schemes using client information. The pattern was clear. Jennifer eliminated threats by destroying the credibility of anyone who could expose her. Marcus, how are we going to prove this in court? We've located 3 of her previous victims who are willing to testify about their experiences. We've also found evidence that Jennifer's witness statements against you were provided by the same people who gave false testimony in previous cases. The same people? Yes. Jennifer has a team of associates who pose as concerned citizens or eyewitnesses when she needs to build a case against someone. They've used variations of the same testimony in multiple states. Marcus pulled out photographs of the 3 people who'd provided witness statements claiming to have seen me stalking Jennifer. Using facial recognition software, he'd matched them to previous cases in Nevada, Arizona, and Colorado, where they'd provided similar testimony against other victims. This is organized crime, Sarah. Interstate fraud, conspiracy to file false police reports, systematic perjury. We're not just defending you against stalking charges, we're exposing a criminal enterprise. That afternoon, Marcus arranged for me to meet with Detective Lisa Rodriguez, who specialized in organized fraud cases. She reviewed our evidence with intense interest. We've been tracking this group for months, Detective Rodriguez explained. The FBI has an open investigation into identity theft and fraud schemes operating across multiple states. Your case might be the key to connecting all the pieces. What do you mean? Jennifer Martinez isn't her real name either. We believe her actual identity is Carmen Elena Vasquez, who's been running con games and revenge-for-hire operations since she was 18. She's wanted in connection with similar schemes in Texas, California, and New Mexico. Detective Rodriguez showed me Jennifer's real criminal history. Arrests for fraud, identity theft, extortion, and conspiracy dating back over 10 years. She'd been using false identities to avoid prosecution while building increasingly sophisticated operations. Detective, if you knew about her criminal background, why wasn't David warned when he applied for a marriage license? She's been very good at staying ahead of law enforcement. She uses multiple identities, moves frequently, and her victims often don't realize they're being systematically targeted until it's too late to prosecute effectively. What happens now? Now we coordinate with the FBI to build a comprehensive case against the entire network. Your evidence, combined with testimony from other victims, should be enough to file federal charges for conspiracy and racketeering. That evening, David came to my apartment with news that changed everything. Sarah, Jennifer made a mistake. She contacted me from Nevada trying to convince me that you're actually dangerous, and that I should consider filing a restraining order against you for my own protection. She contacted you directly? Yes, and I recorded the conversation. She admitted to filing the police report and explained how she'd gathered evidence against you. She also threatened to escalate her campaign if I didn't publicly support her version of events. David played the recording, and Jennifer's voice filled my apartment with casual cruelty. David, your sister is sick. I know it's hard to accept, but she's been stalking me for months. I had to leave town because I was afraid for my safety. The police have proof of her threatening behavior, and if you don't distance yourself from her, she might turn her obsession toward you next. Jennifer, Sarah told me you've done this to other people before. That's exactly what mentally ill people do. They create elaborate conspiracy theories to explain why their own bad behavior has consequences. I'm trying to help Sarah by getting her the psychological treatment she needs, but she's made that impossible by spreading lies about me. What kind of help? I've contacted a psychiatric facility in Nevada that specializes in treating people with obsessive disorders and delusions of persecution. If Sarah admits to her stalking behavior and agrees to voluntary commitment for evaluation, I'll drop the charges. The recording captured Jennifer's attempt to use fake mental health treatment as a way to discredit me permanently, but it also captured something else: her admission that she'd filed false charges as leverage to force my compliance. David, she just confessed to extortion. She filed false criminal charges, and now she's trying to use them to force me into fake psychiatric treatment. I know. And there's more. She also admitted that she never actually left Nevada. She's been coordinating this entire campaign from Las Vegas while pretending to be in hiding. Marcus Peterson arrived within an hour of hearing the recording. His expression was triumphant as he listened to Jennifer's confession. Sarah, this recording is enough to get all charges against you dropped and to file criminal charges against Jennifer for conspiracy, extortion, and filing false police reports. What about her network? Detective Rodriguez is coordinating raids in 3 states. Jennifer's phone call to David was monitored by the FBI as part of their ongoing investigation. She just provided evidence that connects her to the entire operation. As we sat in my apartment that night, planning our next moves, I realized that Jennifer's need to maintain control had become her weakness. She couldn't resist trying to manipulate one final outcome, and that manipulation had given us everything we needed to destroy her network completely. But I also knew that exposing Jennifer's criminal enterprise was only half the battle. I still had to rebuild my reputation, restore my relationships, and recover from weeks of public humiliation. The question was, would justice be enough to repair the damage Jennifer had inflicted on my life? The FBI raids happened simultaneously across 3 states at dawn on a Tuesday morning. I watched the news coverage from Marcus Peterson's office as law enforcement agencies arrested Jennifer and 6 of her associates in coordinated operations. "Sarah, it's over," Marcus said as we watched Jennifer being led away in handcuffs from a Las Vegas hotel. The federal charges include conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion, interstate transportation of stolen identities, and organized criminal enterprise. She's looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison. Detective Rodriguez called within an hour with updates. We recovered Jennifer's computers and found detailed files on over 40 victims spanning the past 5 years. Your case was actually small compared to some of the operations they were running. What kind of operations? Identity theft rings, insurance fraud schemes, fake domestic violence shelters that were actually collecting government funding while providing no services. Your situation was just one part of a much larger criminal enterprise. The scope of Jennifer's crimes was staggering, but what struck me most was how my personal revenge story had uncovered something that affected dozens of other people. That afternoon, I received a call from David. His voice was lighter than I'd heard in weeks. "Sarah, I just got off the phone with the district attorney. All charges against you are being dropped, and you're being officially recognized as a victim and key witness in a federal racketeering case." What does that mean practically? It means your arrest record will be expunged. You'll receive official documentation that you were the victim of a false accusation campaign. And there might be financial compensation from the Federal Victim Assistance Program. But more importantly than the legal resolution was the personal aftermath. Over the following weeks, I received calls from almost everyone Jennifer had contacted during her revenge campaign. Michelle called to apologize for doubting my explanation. "Sarah, I should have trusted my instincts about you instead of listening to some stranger who claimed to be concerned." My landlord, Mr. Peterson, sent a formal letter acknowledging that the complaints against me had been part of an organized harassment campaign. Even people at work who'd heard rumors about my mental health issues reached out to express support and embarrassment that they'd been manipulated by Jennifer's lies. The most meaningful call came from Mrs. Henderson at the library. "Sarah, the library board wants to offer you a promotion and a formal commendation for your role in exposing this criminal network. Your research skills and attention to detail helped law enforcement build their case." 3 months after Jennifer's arrest, I was back at work with a new title, senior research librarian, and a salary increase that reflected my value to the institution. But the real victory wasn't professional recognition. The real victory was the phone call I received from Dr. Patricia Hayes, a victim advocate who'd been following Jennifer's case. "Sarah, I'm reaching out because you've inspired other victims to come forward. Your willingness to fight back instead of accepting Jennifer's narrative has given people the courage to tell their own stories." How many other victims? 18 so far, and more are contacting us every week. Many of them suffered for years thinking they were crazy, or that they'd somehow deserved the treatment they received. Your case showed them that they were victims of organized criminal activity. Dr. Hayes invited me to speak at a conference for victim advocates about recognizing and responding to systematic harassment campaigns. Sarah, what you experienced, the gradual isolation, the character assassination, the false criminal accusations. These are tactics used by organized abusers to silence victims. Your story can help other people identify these patterns before they become victims themselves. Standing at the podium 6 months later, looking out at an audience of social workers, law enforcement officers, and victim advocates, I realized that my story had evolved into something larger than personal revenge. Jennifer Martinez didn't just try to destroy my life, I told the audience. She was part of a network that systematically destroyed people who posed threats to their criminal operations. But here's what they didn't count on: victims who refused to accept that they deserve mistreatment. I spoke about the warning signs I'd missed, the manipulation tactics Jennifer had used, and the importance of documenting everything when someone launches a systematic campaign against you. The most powerful thing you can do when someone tries to destroy your reputation is refuse to be ashamed of defending yourself. Truth has a way of surfacing eventually, but only if victims are willing to keep telling their stories until someone listens. After my presentation, a young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. My sister's ex-boyfriend has been doing exactly what you described, filing false complaints, contacting our family with lies about her mental health, trying to get her fired from her job. We thought she was just being dramatic about his harassment. She's not being dramatic. Document everything, contact victim services, and don't let him isolate her from people who support her. As I drove home that evening, I thought about how far I'd traveled from that kid's table at David's wedding reception. Jennifer's attempt to humiliate me had led to exposing a criminal enterprise that was victimizing people across multiple states. But the most important lesson wasn't about justice or revenge. It was about the power of refusing to accept mistreatment, especially when that mistreatment is carefully disguised as something you deserve. David had rebuilt his life, gotten an annulment instead of a divorce since Jennifer's identity was fraudulent, and was dating someone who actually existed and had never been arrested. My family relationships were stronger than they'd ever been, because we'd all learned the difference between keeping peace and enabling abuse. And I discovered that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to sit quietly at the kids' table while someone tells you it's where you belong. Jennifer Martinez was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Her network was dismantled, and several other victims received justice for crimes they'd been too afraid to report. But for me, the real victory was much simpler. I'd learned that my dignity was not negotiable, and that standing up for myself had protected not just me, but dozens of other people I'd never even met. 2 years after Jennifer's sentencing, I received an invitation that brought everything full circle. David was getting married again, this time to Rebecca, a teacher he'd met through a friend who actually existed, had no criminal record, and treated our family with genuine warmth and respect. Sarah, I know this might bring up difficult memories, but Rebecca and I would be honored if you'd be my maid of honor. I looked at the elegant invitation in my hands, remembering the last wedding invitation I'd received from David, and everything that had followed. David, I'd love to be your maid of honor. Are you sure? I know weddings might feel complicated for you now. Actually, I think this is exactly what I need. The wedding was everything Jennifer's had pretended to be intimate, genuine, and focused on celebrating love rather than social status. Rebecca had insisted on involving me in every aspect of the planning, not because she had to, but because she genuinely enjoyed my input and friendship. The morning of the wedding, as I helped Rebecca with her dress in the bridal suite, she brought up the subject I'd been carefully avoiding. Sarah, I hope you know that David told me everything about Jennifer and what she put you through. I want you to know that what happened to you was horrific, and I'm grateful you fought back. Rebecca, you don't have to. Yes, I do, because if you hadn't exposed Jennifer's network, she might have destroyed other families. You saved people you'll never even meet. During the ceremony, I stood beside Rebecca as she and David exchanged vows that were personal, honest, and full of references to building a life together based on truth and mutual respect. David's voice was steady as he promised to cherish and protect Rebecca, to choose honesty over comfort, and to always remember that love requires vulnerability and trust. When the officiant pronounced them married, I felt genuinely happy for my brother in a way I hadn't been able to feel at his first wedding. At the reception, I found myself seated at the head table, directly across from David and Rebecca, in a place of honor that reflected my actual relationship to the groom. The contrast with Jennifer's kids' table placement was so stark, it was almost funny. During the toasts, David stood up with his champagne glass and looked directly at me. 2 years ago, I made the mistake of not protecting someone I love from someone who was pretending to love me. My sister Sarah saved not just me, but dozens of other people by refusing to accept mistreatment disguised as family harmony. He raised his glass toward me. Sarah taught me that real love doesn't require you to diminish other people, and real family doesn't ask you to accept disrespect for the sake of keeping peace. Rebecca and I are building our marriage on the foundation Sarah fought to preserve truth, respect, and genuine care for the people we love. The entire room toasted, and I felt tears I didn't expect as David continued. Sarah, thank you for showing me the difference between loyalty and enabling, between keeping peace and preserving dignity. This marriage exists because you refuse to let lies masquerade as love. Later that evening, as the reception wound down, Rebecca pulled me aside. Sarah, David, and I have been talking, and we want to ask you something. We're planning to start a family soon, and we'd like you to be our children's godmother. Not because we have to, but because we want our kids to learn from someone who knows how to stand up for what's right. I'd be honored. There's something else. David told me you've been speaking at conferences about systematic harassment. I'm a teacher, and I see students who are being targeted by these kinds of campaigns all the time. Would you be willing to speak at our school district's parent education night? Over the following months, My speaking engagements evolved from victim advocacy conferences to community education programs. I spoke at schools, community centers, and professional organizations about recognizing and responding to systematic harassment and character assassination campaigns. The most rewarding part wasn't the speaking itself, it was the people who approached me afterward with their own stories. A teenager whose ex-boyfriend was spreading rumors to isolate her from friends. A business owner whose competitor was filing false complaints to damage her reputation. A divorced father whose ex-wife was coaching their children to make false accusations. Each person thought their situation was unique, but the patterns were always the same. Systematic isolation, character assassination, false documentation, and the use of institutional systems to legitimize lies. The most important thing to remember, I told audiences, is that people who launch these campaigns count on your shame, your desire to avoid conflict, and your assumption that defending yourself makes you look guilty. But silence in the face of lies isn't noble, it's enabling. A year after David's second wedding, I received a letter that brought my story completely full circle. It was from Isabella Martinez, Jennifer's daughter who was now 7 and living with her grandmother in New Mexico. The letter was actually from Isabella's grandmother, Maria Martinez, who'd been following news coverage of Jennifer's trial. "Dear Ms. Foster," she wrote, "I want to thank you for exposing who my daughter really is. Isabella has been asking questions about her mother, and I've been struggling with how much truth a 7-year-old can handle. Your courage in standing up to Jennifer has given me the strength to be honest with Isabella about her mother's choices, while also protecting her from feeling responsible for them." Maria explained that she'd used the Victim Compensation Fund to provide Isabella with counseling and stability, and that she'd legally adopted her granddaughter to ensure Jennifer could never use her as leverage again. "Isabella is a bright, loving child who deserves better than the mother she was given. Because of your actions, she'll grow up knowing that standing up to bullies is not only right, but necessary to protect other people." The letter included a drawing from Isabella, a stick figure family with the words, "Thank you for keeping people safe," written in careful 7-year-old handwriting. That evening, I called David to tell him about the letter. "Sarah, do you realize what you've accomplished? You've protected a child you've never met from a mother who would have destroyed her life. I just refused to sit quietly at a kid's table. You did more than that. You proved that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to accept that you deserve poor treatment." As I hung up the phone, I looked around my apartment, the same apartment where Jennifer had confronted me 2 years ago, where I'd been arrested on false charges, where I'd rebuilt my life and my relationships from the ground up. The books were the same, the reading chair was the same, but I was fundamentally different. Not because I'd gotten revenge on someone who hurt me, but because I'd learned that my dignity was not negotiable, and that standing up for myself had protected countless other people. 6 months later, I received an invitation that made me smile. It was from Dr. Patricia Hayes, the victim advocate who'd first invited me to speak at conferences. "Sarah, I'm writing to invite you to join the board of directors for the National Coalition Against Systematic Harassment. Your experience as both victim and advocate has given you insights that could help us develop more effective intervention strategies." I accepted the position, not because I wanted to spend my life reliving trauma, but because I'd learned that sometimes your worst experiences can become your most powerful tools for helping others. At my first board meeting, I sat around a conference table with law enforcement officers, social workers, attorneys, and other advocates who dedicated their careers to protecting people from organized harassment campaigns. "Sarah," Dr. Hayes said during introductions, "would you share with the group what you think is the most important lesson from your experience?" I thought about Jennifer's wedding reception, about sitting at that kid's table next to trash cans while someone told me it suited me. I thought about David's phone calls, the FBI raids, the Victim Compensation Fund, Isabella's drawing, and all the people who'd found the courage to tell their own stories. The most important lesson is that refusing to accept mistreatment isn't revenge, it's protection. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. Every time we accept being diminished, we enable someone to diminish others. Every time we stand up for our dignity, we protect someone else's. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Remember that your dignity is not negotiable, and standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to sit quietly at the kid's table while someone tells you it's where you belong. Because when you stand up for yourself, you're standing up for everyone who needs courage to do the same.